I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and you're about to watch part two of my interview with Byron King, who writes Whiskey and Gunpowder for St. Paul Research, which is part of Agora Financial. Part two focuses on copper, and if you enjoy the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.
Mhm.
I also want to make sure that we talk about copper. I think that the last time we spoke, you're bullish on copper. You, I think, said it's a hot market. Arguably now it's an even hotter market.
It's an even hotter
So,
market.
yeah, how are you feeling about copper right now? And do you feel like more people are starting to wake up to that story?
Absolutely. In fact, in my newsletter, Whiskey and Gunpowder, whiskeyandgunpowder.com, just recently I wrote an article called "You Might Not Be Interested in Copper, but Copper is Interested in You." And people just think, oh yeah, copper, yeah, it's that stuff. It's in the wire that you buy at the hardware store. I have a copper pan in my kitchen or something like that. I mean, it's the electric metal, and there's not enough of it. The price is rising, then the price is going to rise some more. China came out of the COVID recession early and fast and strong. They're buying copper by the boatload, as fast as they can, load those ore ships in Peru and Chile and sail them across the ocean. They're bringing it all home. Uh, there's that, but then the rest of the world also is having its own copper boom. I mean, when you look at a housing boom and just say, oh, people are building and remodeling houses. Okay, yeah, the price of lumber has done this. Guess what? The price of copper has done this too. Not as much as lumber, but because what do you do when you build a house, or when you add a wing to your house or remodel your house? You put in new wiring, right? Yeah, of course. Uh, Appliances, plumbing, all that stuff, copper, copper, copper. And then you get to the big thing, which is electric vehicles. Uh, we say, well, electric vehicles are only like this much of the market right now. Yeah, that's true. And they're going to be this much next year, and then this much the year after, and this much and this much. By 2030, I think Ford Motor Company said, I don't know, 40% or half of their product is going to be electric vehicles. General Motors saying by 2035 everything's going to be electric. Toyota is in there. I mean, you name it. Big car companies, they're moving from the internal combustion to electric. Well, basically that pretty much triples, quadruples, or quintuples the amount of copper per car. Now, be careful of just thinking we're going to replace the past with the future one for one. That if they sold if the global market was 70 million cars before, it's going to be 70 million cars, except there'll be electric cars, not gas. No, doesn't work that way. But there's going to be a lot of replacement happening out there, and then those cars are going to be using a lot of copper, far more than they do today. And again, there's just not enough of the metal out there. Old mines. Here's a good question to ask people, because nobody knows the answer to this. What is the average age or the average date of discovery of the world's 20 largest copper mines? Like, if you go to the 20 largest copper mines today that are producing today, the average age of discovery, and I won't hold you in suspense, 1928. 1928, do the math. I mean, that was 93 years ago. Holy smokes. That's the average age of the world's largest copper mines, was discovered 93 years ago. So, I mean, good for these mines. Thank you, Mother Nature, that they had this incredible endowment of copper, that people could be mining copper decade after decade after decade after, and they're still producing today. But some of these mines are really getting, they're really kind of coming to the end. You're down into these, and some of these mines, you're into these grades that are just fractions of a percent of copper, per ton of ore. It's just, and so it's very energy intensive, chemical intensive, machinery intensive, labor intensive, just into everything. And so we have to replace those mines. Replace them with what? Well, that's a good question, because when you look at the chart of, discovery, when you look at the chart of how much money is going into exploration, when you look at the chart of how much is being discovered, these are not happy charts. These are not happy charts. And so they are the recipe for higher prices for copper. They're the recipe for really promising junior type exploration or early stage development companies to do very well. They are a recipe for mergers and takeovers inside the big copper and intermediate size copper. And the good news is that copper is it's a global industry. I mean, you can always find somebody somewhere who understands what you're doing with copper or a copper mine, as opposed to people who are promoting their projects in the arena of other technology metals or battery metals. I mean, lithium is a very tough metal to kind of wrap your arms around. Although there's some really great ideas there. I mean, I was early on banging the drum for actually a U.S. company in North Carolina of all places called Piedmont Lithium. I was writing about them when they were a $6-7 share, and they're up over 40 some dollars now. So interesting play, geologically, chemically, and what have you. But there's not a lot of really super strong plays like that out there. There's hundreds of really interesting copper plays, not that many lithium plays. And then you get into the rare earths, which are absolutely critical for modern technology. In fact, in Whiskey and Gunpowder, I wrote another article recently called "You May Not Be Interested in Rare Earths, but Rare Earths Are Interested in You." I like that theme of "you may not be interested." It's a play on Leon Trotsky and what he said about war. But most of the world's rare earths come from China. That if you follow that sector, you probably know that. I have to say something in all honesty, that the free market is not going to save us. We at the West, there is no free market in rare earths. There will probably be a tiny little free market here or there in rare earths. In order to make rare earths work, it's going to take a massive, government-sponsored program, and without that, it's not going to work. But there's still some investment, angles on there for people. And I've mentioned a few items in Whiskey and Gunpowder. I won't share them on air here, but in my article, "You May Not Be Interested in Rare," I went down a list of everything. I mean, your cell phone, your iPhone or whatever is rare earths. Your TV set, your refrigerator, your microwave oven, your internal combustion car, your electric car. The electricity in your wires comes from power plants. You would have no electricity without it. The tractors and the machinery that farmers use to grow food, those electronics require rare earths. The food processing, rare earth. I mean, without rare earths, modern life as we know it is over. It's not 2021 anymore. It's 1821. The Western business culture, Western strategic thinking, Western political governance has been horrible about it. And they've basically given the game to China. They've won the war without firing a shot. And to the extent people say, "Oh, the free market's going to get us out of this," I said, no, it isn't. I'll bet you $5 it won't. So for whatever $5 is worth.
Okay, we have a lot to unpack there as well. I think I'm going to go back to copper briefly. So I think people are definitely starting to understand what you're talking about with the impending large amounts of demand. We know that supply is not high enough to meet that demand. I guess the question is, if you're an investor who wants to get access to that market, what's the best thing for you to do? And one thing that I wonder is, a small copper company, say a company makes a discovery this year, is that something to be looking for? Is that something that can come online or be acquired soon enough to take advantage of this whole copper situation?
Oh, well, that's a really pertinent question to investors out there who are relatively new to the space. if you want to make money off of the current copper price, which is doing this, then you need to be in the really big companies, Freeport-McMoRan, BHP, Glencore, throw Rio Tinto in there. I mean, all these big companies, they mine some of everything, those are some of the big guys, in South America, you get, Southern Copper, guys like that. If you want to invest in juniors, and what you mentioned, somebody who's just out there trying to make a discovery and what have you right now, you're not going to catch this cycle. What you might catch is, a sort of an upswing in the early days of the excitement of discovery, and but don't forget to sell along the way, because it takes years. It takes years to turn an incredibly good discovery into a working mine. For example, a company I've followed for many years, Trilogy Metals, Trilogy, Trilogy Metals. They're in Alaska. Like this is Alaska, and like here's the Alaska Highway up. Here's a North Slope up here, and pipeline and all that stuff. Go about 2/3 of the way up the Alaska Highway, the Dalton Highway, and then cut west across the Brooks Range on the southern side of the Brooks Range to the middle of, I'll call it nowhere, although people do live there, and very nice people have been there, Ambler, Alaska. The Ambler deposit is this incredible mountain of mineralization, fabulous copper, I mean, they're just incredible mineralization. Love it. It's beautiful. Some of the best mineralization discovered in North America in decades. Fabulous. They are partnered up very tightly with another very nice company called South 32, which is an Australian company, but South 32, good company. And they're drilling. They're doing everything they're supposed to do, but but they're in the middle of Alaska, and they have to build a road from the middle of Alaska over here to the Alaska Highway, to the Dalton Highway, and then so that they can, get things from here to there down to Fairbanks. And Fairbanks is just the railhead of the Alaska Railroad, which would take it down to Anchorage, where they'd put, concentrate on a ship and send it off to the rest of the world. A project, it's an incredibly beautiful piece of geology in a very remote, very, austere area where literally everything has to be flown in. Lots of work, lots of permitting, lots of work with the government, lots of everything, raising lots of money, spending lots of money on you name it. I mean, just to have a hamburger at the cook shack, at the campsite there, that's a pretty expensive hamburger by the time you've, flown that hamburger from, Fairbanks to Ambler. And it takes years. It can take, pick a number, 10 and 15 and 20 years. I mean, or look at, I mentioned Western Copper and Gold in the Yukon. It's a relatively austere area. It's fairly remote. People have been working on that particular deposit for in the range of 20 years. And if they started tomorrow, it would still be, probably 5 or 8 years before it became an up and coming working mine. So when people say, oh, we're going to discover this and we're going to turn it into a mine. Yeah, but it's a generational issue. And I mean, a really generational issue. A fast project might go from, from a brown stain on the hillside to a working mine. This is a fast project in 15 years. A normal project might take 20 to 25 years to go up and running. And along the way, you're in a lot of different industrial cycles, monetary cycles, demand cycles, politicians come and politicians go. Sometimes you have smart politicians who understand what needs to happen to make these things work. And sometimes you have really stupid politicians who are just total demagogues, and they really don't care, what the trail of dead bodies they leave in their wake, as long as they get their pension and, they get their honest graft along the way, if not their dishonest graft. But we're in a really hot time for copper. You can make some really nice money if you're in the right place at the right time. with the juniors. The intermediates are going to do very well, and the big guys are already doing very well. Um, I'll throw out a name. In fact, uh, in terms of like junior companies, and somebody should do your own work on this. But I mean, there's a company called Riverside Resources, and they work in Mexico, and they are basically a copper exploration company, a little junior company, small little outfit. You say, well, why would you mention a little company called Riverside? Well, because they happen to be partnered up with this other company called BHP, which is a really big, humongous company. BHP has Riverside as their partner for. They are basically, they farmed out their exploration in Mexico to Riverside. So Riverside's out there, looking for copper plays, which they can then turn around and hand off to BHP. And if it's not big enough for BHP, well, then they can send it off to other people. But I mean, Riverside's just one example of a small company that's partnered with a big company, where the big company is they're going to do what they're going to do, but the small company, with one or two really nice pieces of news could deliver some serious gains. So that's different ideas, but I mean, you want to be careful if you don't understand the sector, and if you don't understand kind of the dynamics at work, you can burn yourself pretty badly. Don't do that. Avoid that if you can avoid it. But if you do understand it, and you've got some money to risk on the investment side, and you've got some patience, and you're willing to keep yourself educated about it, I think we're setting up people for really strong gains in this industrial resource cycle, which is going to use a lot of copper. A nice little copper ball here, and it's you're going to make some strong gains, life-changing, altering gains if you play your cards right.
Okay, well, that sounds like a good note to finish up on. I just wanted to ask before we wrap up if there's anything else you would leave investors with. Maybe let us know where we can find you online if we want to learn more.
Yeah, well, right now I write a newsletter. Like I said, it's called Whiskey and Gunpowder. Whiskey, like whiskey and gunpowder. Whiskeyandgunpowder.com. And I write 2 to 3 articles a week. It's not all resources all the time. We write about all sorts of stuff. Although I do tend to, find my way to resource issues quite often. And that's where you'll see my thoughts on it. I don't track a portfolio in that newsletter, just because of the nature of that particular newsletter. But I do mention names, and I'll tell you this: that if I mention a name, it's because I know something about it, and I might not track it formally on the newsletter, but I certainly track it informally through my own through my own work and what have you. And I spend a lot of time on the phone and on Zoom calls like this and what have you. I haven't been traveling too much in the last year for obvious reasons. Me and everybody else, now that the bug is seemingly under control and people are getting their vaccinations and all that stuff, things are starting to break out. And so got some real strong ideas, certainly in the U.S. I'd love to be able to cross the border to Canada, but I don't feel like being thrown in isolation for 2 weeks. But I've got some really great ideas out west in Idaho and Montana and Nevada. Just terrific, highly promising ideas that are out there in traditional mining areas. Nothing, got a beautiful project right in the middle of the Stillwater district, literally right next to Sibanye Platinum. I've got a couple ideas I follow in Idaho in gold country. I was just on the phone today talking with people about Nevada and the Cortez trend and the Walker Lane and all that. Man, we're just there's some great things happening, and there's a couple great ideas in Arizona, just copper country, copper gold country. So the resources are there, the ideas are there. There's some really good management teams, very promising, and it's a good time to be getting into the sector. If you don't understand the sector, you do need to educate yourself on it to really kind of get the most out of it.
All right. Well, that sounds like a good place to wrap up. Thank you, as always, for coming on to talk, and hopefully we can have you up here in Canada in person in the near-ish future.
Happy to talk with you again, and certainly happy to get up to Canada again, because I've always enjoyed my great trips to Canada, wherever it is, from coast to coast, north to south, east to west. Great country. So, okay. Thank you so much. Good to
Okay.
talk with you.
Thank you. Yeah. And once again, I'm Charlotte McLeod with the Investing News Network, and this is Byron King. Thanks for watching part 2 of my interview with Byron King. If you missed part 1, which focuses on gold, you can find the link below.